So the point is, I also started where a lot of people are starting. And what did I do? I put myself in a high density environment. Next, what did I do? Knowing no one, I started to volunteer at events where they had interesting speakers and interesting people coming to hear those speakers. So I put myself in Silicon Valley, and then I began volunteering for groups like SVACE. I don't know if it exists anymore, the Silicon Valley Association of Startup Entrepreneurs, I think it was. TIE, the Indus Entrepreneur, which is a very sort of Indian or Indian American focused organization that does a lot in the realm of startups. And I would carry water, I would take out garbage, I would check name badges, I would check people in. Nothing was too low for me. And I'll give you guys a tip that will be obvious to some, but non-obvious to many. When you are volunteering, a lot of folks who volunteer do the absolute bare minimum because they are not getting paid. This is not going to get you noticed. But it sets a very low bar so that if you volunteer at these events and someone's dropping the ball or there's something happening that needs fixing and you just proactively do it, the producers of these events will notice you. And this is what happened over time, over a few months. And then I got invited to join in on meetings that were planning future events. And I eventually got to the point where I was recruiting speakers and able to set the agenda for an entire main event. And then that's how I got to know, say, Jack Canfield, who is the co-creator of Chicken Soup for the Soul, and many others, who introduced me to my book agent many years later, Jack Canfield. But I was a nobody then. You have to play the long game, but you can be methodical in how you play that. And that is one approach, just as an example for how to build your network, which snowballs over time. Don't hump every VIP's leg within 10 minutes of meeting them. Play it cool, you know?
And the gatherings where that person is has a lot of demands on them is the last place you want to do that.
Yeah.
Right?
The way you're going to make yourself
no saliency to that.
Yeah.
Right?
The way you're going to make yourself memorable with people like that is to be very professional, always on time, predict what they're going to need or problems they'll run into beforehand and address them before they even think of them, and be easy to deal with. And people like that, high performers, notice these things. They will make note of it.
Yeah, the being easy to work with is something that I used to tell my graduate students, postdocs. I mean, because the opposite of that, nobody wants.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody wants that.
Yeah, especially in the beginning. Like later, okay, great. You're Steve Jobs. You want to be difficult here and there or a lot? No problem. Yeah. Right? But in the beginning, that can be a real liability. You can make up for that if you're the best in the world, but in the very beginning, you probably won't be. So try to stack the deck in your favor. Volunteering is a shortcut, and that would be one way of doing it. Another now, especially given the virtual communities that exist. So you have subreddits, you have online communities, you have Twitter groups, you have Clubhouse, you've got a million different options, which can be overwhelming.
Is Clubhouse still going?
Maybe not. I have no idea.
Oh, no, I don't know. I'm not saying it's gone. I remember during the pandemic, there were some Clubhouse gatherings. I hopped on there, but I've sort of forgotten to get
maybe
on there.
Not. The platform affinity is really fickle, which is why I think, to the extent possible, if you want to build a world-class, and I use that term very deliberately, network in record time, just to give you a nice headline, I would say focus on the uncrowded channel, which is in person. It's out of fashion. It's out of vogue. Going to a conference and actually interacting with humans in the hallway, approaching panelists. This is another thing that I did. I'll give another tip. So very early on, I would go to conferences. Nobody cared who I was. Nobody knew who I was. Fine. And I would study the panels. Let's say I'm going to a big event like South by Southwest. And this is what I did in 2007, which was just prior to the first book coming out. And I would go to these various in-person events. I was focused mostly on events that had the thematic focus of blogs. We could come back to that. But blogs were what podcasts were a few years ago, right? They drove incredible traffic, but they were undervalued by mainstream media, undervalued by mainstream publishers, et cetera, which meant there was an arbitrage opportunity in a way. And I would pick, say, a handful of panels with topics I thought were super interesting. And then the panel would end, and what would happen? The panelists would get rushed by various folks because many of them were well known. Who was not getting rushed? The moderator. I would go straight to the moderator and I would talk to the moderator. I'd thank them for the panel. I'd be very genuine. None of it was made up, and talk to them for a bit. They would generally ask why I was there, what I was interested in. I would mention whatever that happened to be. In this case, it was, I'm finishing my first book, or I have my first book coming out soon. I'm here to hopefully meet people who are involved with A, B, or C. And then if we hit it off, which was not true every time, but if it seemed to be going well, I would say, I don't know anyone here. I'm really sort of orphaned here, making my way through this entire event. Is there anyone else here you think I would get along with, who maybe I could buy a drink or a coffee? And the vast majority of the time, they'd be like, oh yeah, you should meet so-and-so. And then I get the introduction, and then I would meet that person. I would have a genuine interaction with that person. And if it made sense, if things were going well, I'd do the same thing. Is there anybody else here you think I should just say hi to and get along with? Not who I can ask for something. And that wasn't deception. I was being honest. Like someone I could actually vibe with. And if so, would you mind making the intro? Well, yeah, sure, no problem. Many of those people are still my friends. And by being surgical in that way, not trying to gather business cards, to use a really antiquated metaphor at this point.
People still hand them out.
Yeah, people still hand them out. I guess it depends on where you are, especially like Boston. But if rather than trying to collect people as Pokemon cards, developing, say, 3 to 5 deeper relationships through longer conversations at an event, that is what directly led ultimately to the hockey stick for the 4-hour work week within tech, within specifically San Francisco. So those would be a few approaches for building your network when you don't have the ability to just walk up to, say, a Kevin Kelly and have a conversation. That came over time.